I was 13 when it happened, and even now, years later, I still think about it almost every night before I fall asleep. Some memories don't fade no matter how much you want them to. Back then, I lived with my dad, Martin, and my older brother, Tom, in a modest duplex on the east side of Dayton, Ohio. It wasn't the best neighborhood, but it wasn't a war zone either. Just the kind of place where people sometimes left their cars unlocked. Yet you still heard police sirens a few times a week. Our duplex was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a living room that always smelled faintly of old carpet and dust, a cramped kitchen, and a sliding glass door that led out to a fenced patch of yard where the grass never grew right. My dad and I shared one of the bedrooms, while Tom, who was 16, had the other to himself. Sharing a room with my dad wasn't ideal, but I didn't complain. He worked long days in construction, and most nights by the time I went to bed, he wasn't even home yet. Still, I liked having his things nearby. The heavy boots lined up against the wall, his faded denim jacket slung over the chair, the faint smell of sawdust and aftershave that clung to everything. It made the room feel less empty, like some part of him was always there even when he wasn't. My parents had divorced a few years earlier. Mom lived across town with her boyfriend, and I went to see her some weekends, but Dad had full custody of me and Tom. He did what he could, but he was worn down, rough around the edges. He drank too much, worked too hard, and when he was home, he barely had the energy to do anything except collapse in front of the TV and fall asleep in his recliner. Tom was different. He was in that restless teenage phase where everything revolved around his friends, his girlfriend, and being anywhere that wasn't home. He had this beat-up Ford Taurus that coughed every time he started it. But to him, that car was freedom. He came and went as he pleased, and Dad rarely stopped him. "He's just a kid," Dad would say. "Let him make his mistakes." That left me alone most of the time. And honestly, I didn't mind it. I liked the quiet. I'd sprawl out on the living room floor, the controller in my hands, lost in my PlayStation until my eyes stung. I ate whatever junk I could find, chips, cold pizza, cereal straight from the box, without Tom yelling at me for touching his snacks. My favorite game back then was Resident Evil. Looking back, maybe it wasn't the best thing for a 13-year-old to be obsessed with. Monsters, blood, constant tension, but I loved it. The atmosphere, the puzzles, the creeping dread every time you opened a door, never knowing what waited behind it. It was terrifying, but it was the kind of fear you could control. You could pause it whenever you wanted. Real life didn't come with that button. That night started like so many others. Tom was heading out around 9. "Don't wait up," he said, pulling his hoodie over his head and patting his pocket for his keys. "Where are you going?" I asked, though I already knew I'd get some half answer. He gave me that smirk older brothers master early on, the kind that says you wouldn't get it anyway. "Out," he said simply. Dad was sitting on the couch, lacing up his boots for his night shift. "Don't lock yourself out again," he grumbled. "Last time you had me up at 2 in the damn morning banging on the window." Tom rolled his eyes. Yeah, I'm serious," Dad said, looking up at him. "You do it again, you're sleeping in the car." "Fine," Tom muttered and slipped out the door. Dad stood, zipped up his jacket, and looked over at me. "I'll be back late," he said. "You good here?" "Yeah," I mumbled, focused on my game. "Lock the door after me." "I will." He hesitated, rubbing his jaw like he wanted to say something else. Then he just sighed and said quietly, "Love you, kid." "Love you too," I said automatically, and then he was gone. I locked the front door, slid the deadbolt into place, and went back to the glow of the TV. The minutes bled into hours as I wandered the pixelated halls of the Spencer mansion, conserving ammo and trying not to die. Outside, the hum of passing cars faded as the neighborhood sank into silence. By midnight, my eyes were heavy, my thumbs sluggish on the controller. The house was still, too still, and that's when everything began. I saved my game, powered off the PlayStation, and crawled into bed. The room washed in the soft blue glow of the TV's dying light. The house was quiet, too quiet, except for the occasional creak of the old wood settling. I closed my eyes and pulled the blanket to my chin. That's when I heard it shh, the unmistakable scrape of the sliding glass door being forced open. It was loud, far louder than it should have been. That door was stubborn. You had to shove it hard to make it move, and when it did, it screeched in protest. My eyes snapped open. My chest went tight. It couldn't be Tom. He never used the back door, and Dad, he always carried his key. I froze, every muscle locked, my ears straining. Then came the footsteps, slow, deliberate, heavy, crossing the dining room floor, moving into the kitchen. Whoever was there didn't care about being quiet. My heart slammed against my ribs. I wanted to call out to say Dad or Tom, but something deep inside me, something primal, told me not to. It wasn't them. A shape moved past my bedroom doorway. Just a shadow, a tall silhouette cutting across the dim light from the kitchen. But it was enough to confirm what I already knew. Someone was in our house. The figure turned into the bathroom beside my room. A second later, the harsh bathroom light flicked on, spilling white glare across my floor, slicing through the darkness. My blanket suddenly felt like the weakest shield in the world. I pressed my face into the pillow, breathing through my nose, trying to be silent. The man didn't say a word, didn't call out. He just stood in there for a while, the faint sound of him breathing through his nose. Steady, calm, almost curious. Then he moved again. I heard him in Tom's room next. Drawers sliding open, fabric rustling, objects clinking against each other. "What are you doing?" I whispered to myself, voice trembling so faintly I could barely hear it. My eyes burned with tears I refused to let fall. Minutes crawled by, stretching until I couldn't tell if it had been 10 or 50. Then footsteps again. Coming closer, the shadow slid across my doorway. I clenched my jaw, bracing myself, every nerve screaming that this was it, that he was going to step in, peel the blanket away, and see me curled up beneath it, but he didn't. He kept walking back to the bathroom, out again, into the living room, back again, over and over. His pacing grew heavier, louder. Sometimes he muttered under his breath, a low, frustrated hiss like someone arguing with themselves. Once he let out a short, angry grunt, and the sound of something small hitting the floor made me flinch. He passed my open door at least 20 times. 20 times that shadow gliding by just feet from me. I knew he was aware I was there. I could feel it, but he never came in. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The footsteps faded. The sliding door screeched again, rattling on its old track. Then silence. I didn't move. Not for minutes. Not for an hour. Maybe longer. My body shook so hard the mattress trembled beneath me, but I stayed still, terrified that if I even breathed too loud, he'd come back. At some point, exhaustion dragged me under. I don't remember falling asleep, just the sheer weight of fear pressing me into dreams I couldn't remember. When I woke, sunlight filled the room. Dad was snoring beside me, still in his work clothes, his boots kicked halfway off. The smell of concrete dust and cigarettes clung to him. Tom's music was faintly thumping through the wall. I sat up, disoriented, heart pounding again. "Dad," I said, shaking his arm. "Dad," he grunted, rubbing his eyes. What's wrong? Were you home last night?" He squinted at me. "What are you talking about?" Did you come in through the back door?" He frowned, sitting up a little straighter. "No, why would I? I've got my key." Before I could say more, Tom stumbled out of his room, hair a mess, yawning. "What's your deal?" he mumbled. "Did you come in through the back door?" I demanded. He blinked at me like I was crazy. "Why would I? I came in the front." He dug his car keys out of his pocket, letting them jingle. "See? Still had 'em." I stared between them both, desperate for some slip in their voices, some crack that would tell me I was wrong. But they were steady, confused, and the strangest part, nothing was missing. No forced locks, no stolen cash, no broken glass, just the memory of those heavy footsteps pacing back and forth past my open doorway. 20 times, maybe more. I'm 34 now and I still don't know who that man was or what he wanted. I know what I saw. I know what I heard, and I know he had every chance to hurt me. But he didn't. Sometimes I tell myself it was a burglar who got spooked. Sometimes I try to believe I dreamed it. But deep down I know the truth. There was a man in our house that night, and for some reason, one I'll never understand, he decided to let me live. I was 10 when it happened. Even now, years later, it still lingers in the back of my mind like a scar that never quite fades. We lived then in a small city in western Pennsylvania, in a line of old duplex-style apartments stacked 2 by 2. Ours was the downstairs unit, me, my mom, my dad, and us 4 kids packed into a space that always smelled faintly of laundry detergent and cold air. That winter had been brutal. My dad, Eric, worked construction out of state for weeks at a time, leaving Mom, Lisa, to juggle night shifts at a warehouse 20 minutes away. Most evenings, it was just us kids, passing the hours under dim yellow lamplight, sometimes with a neighbor watching us, sometimes just fending for ourselves until Mom got home around midnight. There was me, my 8-year-old sister Hannah, my 6-year-old brother Michael, and our baby sister Claire, only 2. Hannah and I were inseparable, close enough in age to understand each other, to whisper secrets in the dark when the others were asleep. That night, we were each other's lifelines. Our next-door neighbor, Mrs. Reed, often watched Michael and Claire when Mom was gone. She was kind, but always carried the faint scent of menthol and coffee, and her teenage daughter Sophie sometimes played board games with us. That night, around 9:30, Hannah and I were at the Reeds' living room. The heat crackled from an old space heater as Sophie pulled out a stack of board games, laughing as we argued over the rules. After a while, I said quietly, "I kinda want to go back for a bit, maybe grab snacks or just chill at home." Hannah shrugged. "Okay, but we're coming back, right?" "Yeah, just for a little." The snow outside was packed hard and glittered faintly under the orange glow of the parking lot lights. We cut across the small path to our door, our boots crunching against the ice. Neither of us said much. We didn't mind the dark, or at least we told ourselves we didn't. Inside, the apartment felt different. Still, empty in a way that made the walls seem closer than usual. You know that feeling when silence becomes a sound of its own? The ticking clock in the kitchen was louder than normal, echoing sharp and steady. We settled into the living room. Hannah flipped through one of Mom's worn magazines while I turned on the TV, keeping the volume low so we could still hear the creak of pipes and the wind brushing against the window. Outside, a dog barked somewhere down the block, and the occasional crunch of car tires rolled over the icy street. 15 minutes passed before there was a knock at the door. It wasn't loud, just a polite tap, tap, tap. But in that stillness, it made my heart jump. Hannah looked at me. "Who's that?" "I don't know." I swallowed. "Check who it is before you open it." She tiptoed to the door, her socks silent on the linoleum. Pressing her eye to the peephole, she froze for a second before stepping back. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I don't know who that is." That made my stomach tighten. "Move. Let me see." I pressed my face to the peephole. A man stood there. Someone I'd never seen before. Late 40s, maybe early 50s. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a scruffy gray beard and deep lines cut into his face. His clothes looked wrong somehow. Dirty jeans, a red flannel under a heavy brown jacket, the fabric stiff and stained. His work boots were scuffed and wet, like he'd been walking through slush for miles. He didn't look like anyone from our complex. "Who is he?" Hannah whispered behind me. "No idea," I muttered. Then the knock came again, harder this time. Against every instinct screaming in my chest, I slid the chain off but kept the door cracked just an inch. The rush of cold air brushed my cheek. The man leaned slightly to the side, his face half lit by the porch light. I could see his breath fog in the air. There was something strange about his eyes. Not anger, not even threat exactly, but something restless, something off. "You must be Eric's kids," he said, his voice low and gravelly. I froze. Who are you?" He smiled faintly, the expression slow and deliberate like he'd practiced it. "I'm a friend of your grandfather's. Know your dad, too." "Good man." My throat went dry. I glanced at Hannah, her small hand gripping my sleeve tight. The man's eyes flicked toward her. "Your mom home?" "No," I said quickly, too quickly. He nodded slowly, like that was exactly what he'd expected. "Well, I talked to her earlier today. She knows me. I just wanted to stop by, maybe see her." His tone softened, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Why don't you let me come in and wait?" She wouldn't mind. That's when my chest tightened, like the air itself had turned against me. Every instinct I had screamed wrong. Hannah's hand clutched my arm so tightly I could feel her pulse hammering through her palm. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. The sound was small, but in that tense silence, it felt deafening. I jumped. The man's head twitched slightly, his eyes narrowing with curiosity. "That's probably her now," I blurted. My voice trembled, but I forced a shaky smile. "I'll ask if you can come in." Before he could say a word, I slammed the door shut and twisted both locks, the deadbolt clicking like a heartbeat. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. It wasn't Mom, it was Jenna, my best friend who lived a few buildings down. I answered in a whisper. "Hey, where are you?" Jenna's voice came fast, panicked. "At home. Why?" "My mom just saw some creepy guy hanging around your building," she said quickly. "She saw him looking in windows, before he even knocked on your door. She already called the cops. Don't open it, okay? Don't open the door." For a second, I couldn't breathe. My blood went cold. I turned to Hannah, her wide eyes locked on mine. "We need to get out now." We bolted for the bedroom we shared, socks slipping on the floor. I yanked the window open, the hinges squealing as freezing air poured in, biting my skin. "Go," I hissed. She hesitated. "But, go!" Hannah climbed out first, tumbling into the snow with a soft grunt. I followed, pulling the window shut behind me. The glass fogged from our breath as we crouched low, moving fast along the side of the building. The world outside was eerily still except for the sound of our breathing and the distant hum of traffic. The snow crunched under our feet as we crept toward the alley. My ears strained for movement, footsteps, scraping, anything. My heart pounded so loudly it drowned out the wind. Hannah whispered, "Is he following us?" "Don't look back," I muttered, my voice cracking. We slipped through the narrow alley, shadows swallowing us whole, until the faint porch light of Jenna's house came into view. We sprinted the last stretch and banged on the door. Jenna yanked it open, her eyes wide. We stumbled inside, slamming it shut behind us. The warmth hit us like a wave. Mrs. Harris was already on the phone, her voice tight. Yes, 2 girls, they're safe now, please hurry." She turned to us, hand still on the receiver. "Are you okay?" We both nodded, but Hannah was trembling so hard she could barely stand. I kept my arm around her, the adrenaline still pulsing through me. The police showed up before Mom did. 2 officers came in, their radios hissing, the smell of cold air and wet leather following them. They took our statements in calm, clipped voices, then stepped back outside to search. One went to check our apartment. When they came back, they just shook their heads. The man was gone. They promised to patrol the area, but one of them, a younger cop with tired eyes, said quietly, "Unless he shows up again, there's not much we can do." When Mom finally arrived, she looked pale, shaken. Her breath came fast as she ran to us, pulling us into her arms. Her hands were ice cold. I could feel her heart pounding against mine. That night, after things calmed down, she told me something that made the world tilt. Earlier that day, before her shift, she'd gone to the corner store with our upstairs neighbor. She'd taken baby Claire in the stroller. As they were leaving, a man had stopped her. He'd leaned over, looking at Claire. Then he looked at Mom and said, "She looks familiar." Mom, caught off guard, had smiled politely. "Who's her dad?" he asked. She hesitated, but finally said my dad's name. "Eric." The man smiled, too knowingly. "Eric, yeah, Eric, our last name." Mom froze. She hadn't told him that. "You're Eric's wife, huh?" he said. "I knew your father-in-law." Then he'd just walked away, leaving her unsettled. She said she'd laughed it off, but it had bothered her all afternoon. She'd even taken a different route home, glancing behind her the whole way, hoping to shake the feeling of being watched. But he must have followed anyway. 2 days later, I overheard Mom talking to Mrs. Reed in hushed tones. She'd gone to the leasing office to ask about the security cameras. The footage showed him. Around 4 in the morning, he'd come back. The grainy video caught him pacing in the snow, breath fogging as he tested each window, one by one. He'd pressed his face close to the glass, hands cupped, peering inside. When a lock held firm, he'd move to the next, his movements slow and deliberate, like he was memorizing the layout. He circled the apartment twice before walking away just before sunrise, his figure shrinking into the white haze of falling snow. He never came back. Sometimes late at night I think about that, about how close it was. What if I'd opened the door? What if Jenna's mom hadn't seen him first? What if one of those locks had slipped just once? I'll never know what he wanted, but I know what could have happened, and that thought, the almost of it, still keeps me awake more nights than I can count. Never imagined my mid-20s would look like this. When I was younger, I thought by 24 I'd have a steady job, maybe a small apartment I could decorate however I wanted, and at least a little confidence in myself. Instead, I was trapped in Maple Crest Towers, a sagging high-rise on the ragged edge of Brookhaven, barely scraping by and constantly feeling like the floor could give way at any second. It all started when the pandemic hit. Back in early 2020, I'd been working as a junior account coordinator at a mid-sized marketing firm in downtown Chicago. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid my bills and gave me my first real taste of independence. When the company folded that summer, everything unraveled like falling dominoes. My savings vanished. Job applications went unanswered. Unemployment checks came late, if they came at all. By fall, I'd already missed rent once, then twice. I tried to reason with my landlord, Mr. Whitaker, but he wasn't the type to soften bad news. He was in his 50s, tall, narrow-shouldered, always in pressed slacks even when knocking on tenants' doors. His face carried that mix of discipline and reluctant patience, like a teacher tired of repeating the same lesson. I'll never forget the day he knocked in October. "Lila," Mr. Whitaker sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "We need to talk about these late payments." I stood barefoot in sweatpants, clutching my phone like it could somehow protect me. "I know, I'm trying, I swear. I've been applying nonstop. I even had an interview last week." "I understand," he said evenly. "But this is the third month in a row. I can't keep giving extensions. You need to give me something or I'll have no choice but to start the eviction process." His words hit like a punch to the chest. He wasn't cruel, just done waiting. I swallowed hard, forcing out, "I'll figure it out. I promise." When he left, the apartment suddenly felt suffocating. Just one small bedroom with beige walls, a thin carpet that never stopped smelling faintly of damp concrete, and a counter that stayed sticky no matter how much I scrubbed. Out of habit, I texted Ethan. "Me. Rough day. Whitaker's threatening eviction again." "Ethan. I'm sorry, babe. I know you're trying. Wish I could do more." "Me. Same. I just feel like such a burden." "Ethan, stop that. You're not a burden. You've just had bad luck. We'll get through this." Ethan and I had been together almost a year. He lived across town in a duplex he shared with a friend who worked long shifts at an auto shop. He didn't have much money either, but he always gave me the one thing I needed most: reassurance. That night I tried to distract myself by cleaning. I picked up the heap of clothes from my bedroom floor, washed the dishes stacked in the sink, and lit a cheap vanilla candle that hissed softly as it burned. When the sky outside turned deep blue, I changed into jeans and a soft sweater, trying to trick myself into feeling normal again. I even took a mirror selfie in my bedroom, forcing a smile. The caption read, "At least I don't look like a total wreck, right?" I expected a heart emoji, maybe a teasing "you never do." Instead, Ethan's reply came seconds later. "Ethan, babe. Who's that in the background?" I frowned. "Me. What are you talking about?" "Ethan, behind you." "The closet? Look at the picture again." Confused, I opened the photo and zoomed in. My stomach dropped. Through the narrow crack of my closet door, a dark silhouette stood motionless. Faint but unmistakable, the outline of a tall figure, its head and one shoulder leaning just enough into the gap to catch the light. I froze, staring, my pulse roaring in my ears. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe my coat hanging weird, maybe a trick of the shadows, but the longer I looked, the clearer it became. That wasn't fabric or light. That was someone. My phone buzzed again. "Ethan. Lila, get out of there. Now." My chest seized. I was sitting on my bed, my back to the closet. Every nerve screamed not to turn around. I forced myself to breathe slowly. If I panicked, if I made it obvious, I knew it might make them move. Trying to seem casual, I slid off the bed, walked to the door without looking back, and slipped into the hallway. My hands trembled as I locked the door, then I ran, barefoot, heart-hammering toward the elevator. The ride down felt endless. Each floor lit up agonizingly slow. When the doors finally opened, my knees nearly gave out. "George!" I shouted the moment I saw the night security guard behind his desk. George had worked at Maple Crest for years, late 40s, thick-set, graying at the temples. Usually he joked about the bears or cursed the vending machine for eating his quarters. But when he saw my face, all the color drained from his. "What happened?" he asked, already standing. There's someone in my apartment," I stammered. "In my closet. I swear I saw. Please, you have to come with me." George grabbed his flashlight and radio, his easy tone gone, replaced by something clipped and professional. "Stay close to me," George said. We rode the elevator up together. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat, each thud sharper than the last. When the doors slid open on my floor, George motioned for me to stay behind him. He slipped his master key into the lock, pushed open my door, and stepped inside with his flashlight raised. The apartment was silent, still, but something was wrong. My closet door, closed when I'd left, now hung wide open, and my bedroom window, which I knew I'd locked, was halfway up. The curtains billowed in the cold night air, soft and ghost-like. George's voice came low. "Did you open this?" I shook my head so fast it made my vision blur. "No, I never touched that window. I live on the 7th floor. Nobody could." I stopped. The words turned to dust in my mouth. Because the truth was right there in front of us. Whoever had been in that closet hadn't left through the door. They'd gone out the window, 7 stories above the ground. George swept his flashlight beam slowly across the room, his jaw tightening. "I'll check the stairwells. Stay in the lobby until I say otherwise." I stood frozen, staring at the open window, the cold air clawing its way into my lungs. The curtains rippled again, rattling faintly like laughter. There was no fire escape out there. No ledge wide enough to stand on, nothing. "Go downstairs," George said again. "But what if they're still in here?" I whispered, my voice barely holding together. He met my eyes. "Then that's my job to handle. Go, Lila." My legs finally obeyed. I stepped into the hallway, fumbling my phone with shaking hands, dropping it once before shoving it into my pocket. I didn't wait for the elevator. I bolted down 7 flights of stairs, the sound of my own footsteps echoing like gunfire. When I burst into the lobby, the night desk attendant looked up, startled. "You okay?" I just shook my head and collapsed into one of the vinyl chairs, trembling from head to toe. My whole body felt drenched in ice. Minutes stretched. Then my phone rang. "Ethan, Lila, are you safe? Talk to me." His voice cracked through the speaker, frantic. "I'm downstairs," I whispered. George went to check. "Ethan, I swear there was someone in my closet. And the window, it was open." Silence. Then his voice came steadier, firmer. "Stay there. Don't go back up until George clears it. Promise me." It felt like forever before the elevator doors opened again. George stepped out, flashlight still in hand. He looked exhausted and uneasy. "I didn't find anyone," he said, lowering the light. "Checked your place top to bottom. Nobody's there now." "But the window," I started, my voice trembling. I believe you," he interrupted softly. "But if someone went out that way, I don't know how. 7th floor's a long drop." I stared at him, waiting for an explanation that never came. Instead, he patted my shoulder. "I'll file a report. Maybe stay with a friend tonight, just in case." That's exactly what I did. Ethan came to get me. I stayed at his duplex that night, wide awake, jumping at every creak, every shift of the pipes, every imagined footstep in the hall. By morning, I forced myself to go back. The sunlight didn't help. My apartment looked normal, too normal. No footprints, no scuff marks, no signs of anyone breaking in. Just a faint trace of cold air in my bedroom, as if the window had been open for far longer than it should have been. Mr. Whitaker came by later after hearing from George. "You should file a police report," he said. "Even if they can't find anything, it's better to have it on record." So I did. 2 officers showed up that afternoon. They asked the standard questions. Did I see anyone? Did I hear anything? Did I have enemies? An ex who might stalk me? No, I told them. They checked the locks, took a few notes, and left with polite, skeptical smiles. After that night, something inside me changed. The apartment no longer felt like mine. Every creak in the walls, every flicker of shadow made my heart leap. I started sleeping with a chair jammed under the doorknob and the TV humming low, just so I wouldn't be swallowed by silence. Ethan tried to comfort me, but I could see it, the unease behind his eyes. One night, weeks later, he said quietly, "That photo you sent, the figure in the closet, it looked like it was leaning toward you. Like it wanted you to notice." His words stuck in my head, festering. By December, the rent finally caught up with me. Mr. Whitaker had been patient, but patience only went so far. I packed up my life piece by piece, feeling like I was abandoning more than an apartment. I was leaving behind a version of myself that had fought too hard to stay afloat. When I closed the door to Unit 7C for the last time, I turned for one final look. The closet door was cracked open again, just a sliver. I know I shut it. To this day, I don't know what I saw that night. A person? Something else? I still don't understand how anyone could have climbed out a 7th-floor window without falling to their death. And sometimes, late at night, when I scroll too far back in my camera roll and find that picture, the one with the shadow in the closet, I feel that same frozen dread creep up my spine. Because every time I zoom in, I notice something new. A faint pale handprint pressed against the inside of the closet door, like it wasn't just hiding, like it was waiting. And I'll never know if it still is. I was 10 years old when it happened, and even now, 8 years later, I can still remember every sound, every shadow, every breath I took that night. It's like it was carved into me, something I can't scrub away no matter how hard I try. Back then, my family lived in a quiet suburb just outside Bergen, Norway. It wasn't the kind of place where people worried about much. Nobody locked their bikes. Kids walked home from school alone. Neighbors left their doors open and stopped by unannounced to borrow sugar or coffee. It was safe, or at least it was supposed to be. My parents weren't divorced yet, and I lived with both of them, Mom, Helena, and Dad, Lars and my 2 younger brothers, Daniel, who was 6, and Adrian, just 3. That Friday evening in late autumn had that gloomy stillness I've never forgotten, the kind where the air darkens too early and feels heavy, like it's warning you of something. My parents were planning a trip to IKEA to buy a bed frame and some shelves for the living room. They were taking Daniel and Adrian with them. I hated IKEA even back then. The endless maze of furniture displays, the stale air that smelled faintly like cardboard and meatballs, the bickering couples trying to agree on lamps, it all made me feel trapped. So when Mom called out from the hallway, zipping up her jacket halfway, "Alina, you coming with us?" I barely looked away from the TV. "No," I said, curling my legs under me on the couch. "I'm tired." She gave me a look, the kind that wasn't angry, just concerned. "Are you sure?" "Yeah, I'll be fine." Dad poked his head out from the entryway. "We won't be long," he said, his tone firm but warm. "Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone, okay?" "I know," I replied a little impatiently. He smiled faintly, the corners of his mouth tugging upward like he didn't really expect me to listen, but hoped I would anyway. When the door closed behind them, the apartment seemed to exhale. The silence was thick and strange, like the walls were holding their breath. I turned up the TV, flipping through channels until I landed on an old cartoon rerun. The blue glow filled the room, washing over the furniture and reflecting off the windows. For a while, it was comforting, the hum of voices, the steady rhythm of background laughter. Then, maybe half an hour later, a craving hit me. Candy. It was Friday after all, Fredisco's, as we called it. Friday coziness, chips, chocolate, soda, small celebrations for surviving another week. The little convenience store Solberg's was less than a 10-minute walk from our apartment. I pulled on my hoodie, shoved my feet into sneakers, and locked the front door behind me. The key felt cold and heavy in my pocket as I stepped into the evening air. The sky was already ink dark. Streetlights hummed softly, casting the road in warm orange patches. The air smelled of wet leaves and asphalt, Fresh rain from earlier still clung to the ground, glistening faintly under the lamps. I passed a few people walking their dogs, their breath puffing in little clouds, and nodded politely as I went by. By the time I reached Solberg's, I'd already decided what I wanted: a bag of Smash, a soda, maybe some sour gummies if I had enough change. The older woman behind the counter smiled as I approached. She'd known my family for years, probably since before I was born. "All alone tonight, Alina?" she asked, scanning my snacks with a practiced hand. "Yeah," I said, setting the coins on the counter. "My parents went to IKEA." "Ah, IKEA," she chuckled. "Poor thing. You escaped the maze." "Exactly," I said with a grin. "Well, enjoy your treats," she said warmly, handing me the small plastic bag. "Thanks," I said, my voice echoing slightly as the bell above the door jingled when I stepped outside. The night felt colder now, sharper. I hugged the bag to my chest and started walking home, my sneakers squeaking faintly on the damp pavement. That's when I noticed him. A man on a bicycle was coming from the opposite side of the street. At first, I didn't think much of it. Plenty of people biked around even at night, but something about him caught my eye. The way he moved was wrong. His bike wobbled like he couldn't keep balance, his legs pumping unevenly, almost mechanically, like he was forcing himself to remember how to pedal. My first thought was that he was drunk. That wasn't common in our neighborhood, but it wasn't impossible either. I lowered my gaze, not wanting to meet his eyes as we approached each other. His jacket was far too thin for the cold, his hair a tangled mess, and even from across the street, something about him felt off, like the air around him carried its own warning. He muttered something as he wobbled past, words blurred and wet. I couldn't make them out, and I didn't want to. I just kept walking, my pace quickening, the plastic bag crinkling in my hand. Then he shouted, "Hey, stop a second!" The sound cracked through the stillness, his voice rough, slurred but loud enough to echo down the empty street. I froze mid-step, every instinct in me screaming to run, but my body refused to listen for that split second. When it did, I forced my legs to move. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. "Girl, wait!" He yelled again. His voice was clearer this time. He was talking to me. I broke into a run, clutching the bag tight against my chest. Behind me came the sharp screech of metal, the sound of his bike turning around. The chain rattled as he picked up speed. My sneakers slapped hard against the wet pavement. The rows of identical houses blurred past, yellow windows glowing like silent witnesses. Our apartment complex backed onto a small patch of forest, a narrow path that cut through to the back gate. It was darker, but faster. Without thinking, I veered off the sidewalk and darted into the trees. Branches scraped my hoodie. The air turned colder, wetter. The ground was soft and uneven beneath my shoes, covered in damp leaves that crunched and slid under my feet. My lungs burned with every breath, but adrenaline kept me going. "Wait!" His voice echoed through the woods, closer than I wanted to believe. "I just want to talk." I didn't answer. I just ran harder, dodging low branches, my breath coming in ragged gasps. When the trees finally broke open and I saw the pale glow of our apartment building ahead, relief surged through me like electricity. My legs were shaking. My chest felt like it was on fire. I stumbled up the steps, fumbling with the key, my fingers trembling so violently I almost dropped it. The lock finally clicked. I shoved the door open, stumbled inside, and slammed it shut behind me. The sound echoed through the empty apartment. I twisted the lock once, twice, then pressed my back against the door, trying to quiet my breathing. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. The silence was suffocating. After a few seconds, I crept toward the living room. I didn't dare turn on the lights. The windows faced the front yard, and I didn't want him to see movement. I crouched low and carefully lifted one corner of the blinds. He was there, standing just a few feet from the door. The man's chest heaved, his breath visible in the cold air. Under the dim yellow streetlight, his face looked pale and damp, his eyes darting left and right before God, locking directly on the window. On me. I stumbled back so fast I nearly fell, clapping a hand over my mouth to stop the scream rising in my throat. A few seconds later, the knocking started. "Hey," he said softly, voice uneven, coaxing. "Open up. I just want to talk." The sound of his knuckles against the wood was steady at first, then harder, louder. The door shuddered with each hit. "Come on," he muttered, pressing his forehead against the door. I could hear the rasp of his breath through the gap. "Don't be scared. Just open up." I didn't move. Couldn't. My entire body trembled, every muscle locked in terror. My mind screamed to grab my phone, to call my parents, but my hands wouldn't obey. Then headlights. A sudden wash of white light swept across the yard. Tires crunched on gravel. Mr. Johansson, our elderly neighbor, was pulling into his driveway. The man froze. His head jerked toward the car, and just like that he backed away, stumbling toward his bike. Without another word, he climbed on and pedaled off into the darkness, swaying side to side just as before until the sound of the wheels faded completely. I stayed crouched by the window long after he was gone, my breath shaking, my palms slick with sweat. I didn't move until I heard the familiar sound of my parents' car pulling up, the cheerful noise of Daniel and Adrian bickering as they came inside. When Mom asked how my evening had been, I just said, "Fine, I don't know why. Maybe I didn't want them to think I'd done something stupid by staying home. Maybe I couldn't find the words." It wasn't until years later, when I was 16, that I finally told her. Her face went pale. Her hand shot to her mouth.
"Why didn't you tell us, Alina?"
God, that's terrifying. I just shrugged, because what could I say? Even now, I still see him sometimes when I close my eyes. The pale man under the streetlight staring straight through the glass. That night was the first time I realized that danger doesn't need noise or chaos to find you. Sometimes it waits quietly just outside your door. I was 18 in the spring of 2009, just a couple of weeks away from graduating high school. Back then, my life looked like every other senior's in our small Ohio town. I lived with my mom, Angela, and my 14-year-old sister, Mariah, in a quiet Maplewood neighborhood where nothing much ever happened. My dad had left when I was 11. For a while I hated him for it, but after a few years I just got used to the empty chair at the dinner table, the silence where his voice should have been. I was on the Maplewood High football team. I didn't always enjoy the endless drills or the suffocating heat under my pads, but nothing compared to the rush of Friday nights. The stadium lights buzzing overhead, the crowd chanting my name, the heavy smell of turf and sweat and adrenaline. For those few hours I felt like I mattered. My best friend Marcus always joked, if football didn't exist, half of us would forget who we are. He wasn't wrong. It was a Thursday afternoon, late May, when I dragged myself home from another brutal practice. My shirt clung to my back, soaked through, and my legs felt like concrete. The house was still when I stepped inside, the kind of silence that made the air feel heavier somehow. On the kitchen counter sat a note in my mom's looping handwriting. Went to the grocery store. Won't be back until later. Heat up the leftovers in the fridge if you're hungry. Mom. I crumpled the note lightly in my hand and dropped it beside my bag. Guess it's just me, I muttered, the sound of my own voice startling in the quiet. The exhaustion in my muscles begged for a long, scalding shower, one of the few luxuries of being home alone. Upstairs, I grabbed a towel from the linen closet. "Man, I stink," I said under my breath, half laughing. "This is gonna feel good." The pipes groaned as I cranked on the hot water. Steam filled the small bathroom, fogging the mirror, wrapping around me like a blanket. When the first drops hit my skin, I exhaled, head tilted back, the world narrowing to the hiss of water and the thrum of my pulse. I lost track of time in that haze of heat and silence. Then, beep. A sharp, distinct tone cut through the rush of the shower. My body went rigid. I knew that sound too well. It was the chime of our front door's smart lock. Someone had just unlocked it. "Mom?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the water. I shut the shower off instantly. The sudden silence roared in my ears. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might shake the walls. I yanked the towel around my waist and pressed my ear to the bathroom door. Nothing. No footsteps, no voices. Moving fast but trying to stay quiet, I pulled on a pair of shorts and a t-shirt, every motion jerky with adrenaline. My skin was still damp as I stepped into the hallway, the floorboards creaking beneath my feet. At the top of the stairs, I froze. The front door was open, just a sliver, but enough for the late sunlight to slice through. My mom's car wasn't in the driveway. She wouldn't have walked to the store. It was miles away. I stepped out onto the porch. The street was empty, the air heavy with that end-of-day stillness before sunset. Long shadows stretched across the lawn. A breeze carried the faint smell of cut grass and something else, something metallic, like blood or rust. "This doesn't feel right," I muttered, my throat dry. I turned back toward the house, every instinct screaming to leave, but I couldn't. Not yet. I had to know. The living room was empty. The TV remote sat on the couch where I'd left it. Nothing seemed touched. Then I turned toward the kitchen, and my stomach dropped. A man I had never seen before was crouched near the pantry, his back to me. His shoulders rose and fell in slow, deliberate breaths. In his right hand, something caught the light, a metallic glint. At first, I thought it was a wrench, maybe something Mom's repair guy had left behind. But then I saw the shape, the edge. It was a knife. My hand shot to my mouth before a sound could escape. The world shrank to the steady hum of the fridge and the pounding of my heart in my ears. He hadn't seen me. Not yet. For a split second, every option flashed through my head. Run, hide, shout. But none of them felt real. If I made a noise, if he turned around, I'd never make it to the door in time. My phone was upstairs in my room. That thought hit me like a punch to the gut. No weapon, no plan. Just a towel still damp around my shoulders and a stranger with a knife downstairs. I started backing up the stairs, one careful step at a time, barely breathing. Each creak of the wood sounding like an alarm in my ears. My heart hammered so loudly I was sure he'd hear it. When I finally reached my room, I shut the door as quietly as I could and turned the lock, my hands trembling so hard the latch rattled. My fingers fumbled for my phone on the desk. I nearly dropped it twice before the screen lit up. I dialed 911 with shaking hands. 911, what's your emergency? A woman's calm voice answered. I tried to speak, but my breath came in ragged gasps. There's someone in my house, I whispered, forcing the words out. He's got a knife. Please send someone. Her tone softened but stayed steady, professional. Okay, listen to me. Stay hidden. Do not try to confront him. Officers are on their way. Stay on the line with me, all right? I crouched beside my bed, the phone pressed tight against my ear, trying to keep my sobs quiet. My chest hurt from holding in air, my pulse thudding in my neck. Then, from somewhere below, I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, heavy, creaking up the stairs. Each step was deliberate, patient. He's coming upstairs, I whispered into the phone. Stay quiet, the operator murmured. Help is close. Don't move. The footsteps stopped outside my door. The silence was suffocating. Even the air felt thick, unmoving. I could hear nothing but the faint hum of the line and the blood rushing in my ears. Then, knock. A slow, deliberate knock. Kid. The man's voice came through the door, low, gravelly, and wrong, in a way I still can't describe. I know you're in there. Every muscle in my body locked. I pressed my hand over my mouth, shaking violently. Please hurry, I mouthed to the phone, though no sound came out. The knocking grew louder, harder. Then, without warning, crack. The door burst open, the cheap lock splintering from the frame. I screamed before I even saw him. He stood in the doorway, a man in his late 30s, his face pale and hollow, streaked with sweat and grime. Greasy hair stuck to his forehead. His eyes were sunken but sharp, darting around the room like a trapped animal's. The knife gleamed in his hand, slick with reflected light. I pressed myself into the farthest corner, barely breathing. His head tilted slightly, and for a moment his gaze swept right past me. Then, sirens. Faint at first, somewhere down the street, getting closer. His eyes snapped toward the window. He muttered something I couldn't catch, then spun on his heel and bolted. I heard him thunder down the stairs, the back door slamming open, then shut again. Seconds later, boom, boom, boom. Police, open up! I scrambled to my feet and stumbled down the stairs, nearly tripping over myself. My body was trembling so badly I could hardly grip the doorknob. When I yanked it open, 3 officers stood there, flashlights in hand, faces set with urgency. He was here. I gasped, my throat raw. He had a knife. He went out the back. One officer brushed past me, gun drawn. Another placed a steady hand on my shoulder. You're safe now. Just breathe, son. Minutes later, my mom's car screeched into the driveway. She jumped out before it even stopped moving, grocery bags spilling onto the sidewalk. Michael! Oh my God, Michael! She ran to me, clutching me so tightly I could barely breathe. I didn't try to stop the tears this time. I broke completely, sobbing into her shoulder, every ounce of fear crashing out of me all at once. The police searched the entire property but found nothing. No forced entry. No broken windows. The breezeway door's lock, they said, looked like it had been picked, cleanly, expertly. The man had vanished into the woods behind our neighborhood before anyone saw him. They never found him. I still don't know how he knew the code to our front door or why he chose our house. But I'll never forget the sound of that knock, or the way his voice cut through the quiet, like he was already inside my mind. Even now, when the floorboards creak at night or I hear the faint beep of a lock, I feel that same ice crawl up my spine, because I know how close I came to not making it out of that room alive. I never thought a single weekend could change how I felt about being alone in my own home. But last Saturday proved me wrong in every possible way. My name is Marcus Whitaker, I'm 20 years old, and I live in a suburban town called Ridgefield, just outside Syracuse, New York. Most of the year I'm away at college, but summers I spend back home with my parents. I've always been the kind of person who prefers quiet nights, video games, late-night movies, the hum of the fridge, over parties or crowded bars. Being home alone never scared me. Not until that weekend. My parents, Laura and Stephen Whitaker, had been planning to attend their close friend's wedding in Vermont for months. They left Friday afternoon, all smiles and suitcases, and I stayed behind. I wasn't close to the couple getting married, and honestly, the thought of having the whole house to myself for 2 days sounded like heaven. No one to tell me to mow the lawn or complain about dishes in the sink. Just me, the big screen TV, and silence. The Whitaker house is a pale gray split level with a deck that overlooks the woods behind us. We're tucked at the dead end of a quiet street, so random visitors are basically non-existent. Even delivery drivers struggle to find us. It's the kind of neighborhood where people wave from a distance, polite but detached. Friday night was perfect. I sprawled on the couch, surrounded by empty snack bags and the faint static of late-night cable, watching movies until nearly 2 in the morning. The rain had started around midnight, a soft rhythmic tapping against the windows that made the whole house feel cocooned. The couch was too comfortable to leave, so I pulled the throw blanket over myself and decided to sleep right there. When I woke the next morning, it was silent. Not just quiet, hollow. The kind of stillness that makes you aware of your own breathing. The blinds on the sliding glass doors were mostly shut, but through a narrow 5-inch gap I could see the rain still sliding down the glass in thin silver lines. The digital clock on the TV screen read 9:32 a.m. I rubbed the sleep from my eyes and grabbed the remote, flipping the TV on just to fill the emptiness with sound. The screen flickered, a commercial murmuring in the background. That's when I heard it. Knock, knock. 2 quick taps at the front door. Not loud, but sharp enough to freeze me mid-motion. My stomach clenched. "Who the hell knocks at this hour?" I muttered under my breath. No one ever knocked on our door, especially not on a rainy Saturday morning. I stayed perfectly still on the couch, staring toward the hallway. From where I sat, I couldn't see the front door, and I prayed whoever was out there couldn't see me either. Maybe it was a delivery. I'd ordered a few things earlier in the week. That thought gave me a flicker of calm. I picked up my phone, thumbed open the Amazon app and checked the tracking info. Delivery scheduled for 5 p.m. My chest tightened. The knock didn't come again. Whoever had knocked was still out there waiting. Okay, maybe it's a neighbor, I whispered, though my voice was shaking. I forced myself up, every floorboard creaking louder than usual, and crept to the small window beside the front door. I lifted the edge of the curtain. No one. The porch was empty, rainwater pooling at the edges of the welcome mat. I let out a shaky laugh. Jesus, Marcus, you're jumpy as hell. Turning back toward the living room, I froze. Creak, creak. The distinct sound of footsteps on wet wood, coming from the back deck. My breath caught. Slowly I turned toward the sliding glass doors. The blinds swayed slightly, disturbed by a faint draft. I edged closer just enough to peek through the narrow gap. A man stood there, bald, mid-40s, skin pale and slick from rain. He wore a black jacket and matching pants, the fabric clinging to him, and he was staring straight at me. No expression, no movement. Just standing there, eyes locked on mine. My pulse roared in my ears. I couldn't even scream. Then his hand moved, slowly gripping the handle of the sliding door. He pulled. The lock held, but the glass trembled with each yank. "Oh my God," I whispered. That broke the spell. I spun around and bolted down the hallway, my socks slipping on the floor. I slammed myself into the bathroom and fumbled the lock with shaking hands. My heart hammered so hard it hurt. Inside, I pressed my ear to the door and listened to the rain, and to the faint, deliberate sound of someone moving outside my house. I pressed my back against the door, trying to slow my breathing, but every inhale came out sharp and ragged. Then came the first bang against the glass. I jumped so hard my head hit the cabinet behind me. Another bang, louder, closer. My chest seized. "My phone," I whispered. "It's still on the couch." I ran a trembling hand through my hair, pacing the tiny bathroom. No, no, no. My voice cracked. I couldn't stay in here without a way to call for help. Heart hammering, I eased the door open just an inch. The house groaned with rain and tension. Then, clutching my courage, I sprinted for the living room. The man was still there, kicking at the sliding glass door with heavy, deliberate strikes. Water streamed down his face, his jacket plastered to his body. The glass shook, spiderweb cracks forming near the latch, but it hadn't shattered yet. I snatched my phone off the couch and bolted back down the hall, slipping once on the slick wood. Just as I slammed the bathroom door shut again, another brutal crack split the air. My hands shook so violently I nearly dropped the phone as I hit 911. 911, what's your emergency? A woman's voice, calm, too calm. There's a man trying to break into my house. I gasped, my words tumbling out. He's in the back, he's smashing the glass door. I'm alone, please, please, hurry. Sir, slow down. What's your address? I rattled it off so fast I wasn't sure she even caught it. Okay, we have officers on the way. Stay on the line with me, okay? I nodded frantically, even though she couldn't see me. He's still out there, I whispered. Then came the crash, the unmistakable sound of the sliding door shattering. Stay calm, the operator said, her voice buzzing in my ear. Where are you now? He's inside. The words barely left my lips. I climbed into the shower stall, clutching the phone to my chest. He's coming. Footsteps, heavy, wet, moved across the living room floor, each one deliberate. My pulse beat so loud it drowned out everything else. He reached the bathroom door and tried the handle. The lock rattled. Then the pounding began, thud, thud, thud. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. He's right outside. The screen went black. Dead battery. No, no, no. I mouthed silently, biting back a scream. The banging grew harder, louder. I imagined the wood splintering just like the glass. Then nothing. Silence. I froze, counting the seconds by my heartbeat. 1 minute, 2, then faintly footsteps moving away down the stairs. Was he leaving? Or just trying to trick me? I didn't dare check. I crawled into the small linen closet, curling up between towels, pulling them over myself as if cotton could protect me. I was shaking so violently the shelves rattled. Then, boom. The bathroom door jolted on its hinges. Again, boom, louder this time. He'd found something heavy. Maybe the baseball bat my dad kept in the garage. I clamped a hand over my mouth, tears stinging my eyes. Every muscle screamed to run, but there was nowhere to go. Then suddenly, police, open up. The shout came from the front of the house. I barely believed it was real. The pounding on the bathroom door stopped. Quick footsteps retreating fast. Chaos erupted, boots thudding, voices shouting commands. Put it down! Hands where I can see them. More yelling. Then, Silence again. I didn't move until I heard a firm knock on the bathroom door. "Marcus, it's the police. You're safe now." I pushed open the closet door, my limbs numb, and unlatched the bathroom door with shaking fingers. 2 officers stood in the hallway, rain dripping from their uniforms, their radios crackling softly. One of them spoke gently. "We've got him. You're okay now, son." My knees nearly gave out. I gripped the sink to stay upright. They told me later they'd found him in the backyard still clutching the bat. He hadn't said a word, not during the arrest, not after. Just stared blankly as they dragged him away. It's been a week. I haven't slept in the living room since. I can't even look at the sliding doors without feeling that same cold grip in my chest. The police never figured out why he came. He wasn't from Ridgefield. He had no connection to us. He just showed up. And sometimes when I'm lying in bed listening to the rain, I swear I still hear it. 2 soft knocks at the front door. I was 10 years old when it happened, and even after all these years, I still can't step into a quiet house without that same tight, crawling feeling in my chest. My name is Julian Harper, and back then I lived with my parents and my older sister in a sleepy suburb called Maplewood, Ohio, the kind of place that looked too normal to ever feel dangerous. Nobody locked their doors in Maplewood. Kids left bikes on lawns overnight. Porch lights flickered on at dusk more out of habit than fear. The streets were lined with tidy maples and small 2-story houses with porches sagging from summer heat, and attics no one really went into. Everyone thought Maplewood was safe. I thought so too. Until that night. My dad, David Harper, worked as a mechanic. He was practical, stubborn, always carrying the faint scent of motor oil and metal with him, like the garage clung to his skin. My mom, Laura, was a 2nd-grade teacher with a soft voice that could calm anyone, except when she got that sharp tone that meant she meant business. My sister Samantha, 14 and endlessly dramatic, loved to roll her eyes at everything I said. We fought constantly. TV remotes, pizza slices, you name it, but she was still my sister. She still cared. That Friday afternoon felt ordinary, the kind of ordinary you never think you'll miss. I threw my backpack down by the couch, the thud echoing in the living room. Mom was at the counter, scribbling something on a yellow pad, her hair falling over her shoulder. Dad leaned in the doorway, keys jingling against his calloused hand. Samantha sat at the table, half listening, scrolling through her phone like she couldn't be bothered. "Julian," Mom said without looking up, "we're heading to the outlet mall. Want to come?" I didn't even glance away from my Nintendo DS. "Nah, I just want to stay here." Dad raised an eyebrow. "You sure? We'll be gone a couple hours, maybe 3. "I'll be fine," I said quickly. Samantha smirked without lifting her eyes. "You're gonna be all by yourself, scaredy cat." "I'm not scared," I shot back. "I'm 10, not 5. Mom sighed but smiled a little. She crouched to my level, brushed her fingers through my hair. Her hand was warm, faintly smelling of chalk and coffee. "Lock the doors, okay? And don't answer if someone knocks." "I know, Mom," I muttered, rolling my eyes but feeling that flicker of nervous pride. Dad gave me a firm look, the kind that said this wasn't up for negotiation. "We mean it, Julian. Don't open the door for anyone. Got it?" "Yes, Dad." "Okay then," Mom said, grabbing her purse. "We'll be back after dinner. Call the landline if you need us." The front door clicked shut. I listened to the familiar sound of the car engine rumbling to life, gravel crunching under the tires as it rolled down the driveway. Then came the silence, the heavy, swollen kind that fills every corner once the house empties. I went upstairs to my room at the front of the house. The moment I hit the power button, the Xbox came alive with that soft electronic hum, a comforting mechanical heartbeat. I opened a bag of chips, crumbs sticking to my fingers, and dropped to the carpet with my controller. My game loaded, lights flickering across the screen. I barely made it through the opening cutscene when I heard it. At first, I thought it was just the house settling, the usual creaks and sighs that came after sunset. But this sound was different, softer, measured like someone trying not to be heard. It came from the hallway, right outside my bedroom. I froze. My controller went still in my hands. The room felt suddenly too quiet, except for the faint rhythmic thudding of my pulse in my ears. The door was open just a few inches. enough for a sliver of light from the hallway to stretch across the floor. I leaned forward, breath caught in my throat, and peered through the gap. That's when I saw him. A man was climbing down from our attic, slow, deliberate, like he'd been living up there for days and didn't want to wake anyone. His boot hit the hallway carpet with a dull thud. He was tall, his jacket stained and wrinkled, jeans dirty, hair hanging in greasy strands over his face. He moved with care as though he already knew where everything was. My stomach dropped so fast it felt like falling through the floor. I jerked back into my room, my heart slamming so hard I thought he might hear it. He hadn't seen me. At least I prayed he hadn't. For a long moment I just crouched there beside my bed, frozen. My brain couldn't catch up with what my eyes had seen. Why was there a man in our attic? We never even went up there, just for Christmas decorations, maybe once or twice a year. The air in my room felt suddenly heavier, tighter, like the walls were holding their breath with me. Then I heard it, the slow creak of footsteps on the hallway floorboards coming closer. He was walking toward my room. Instinct took over. I dropped flat to the carpet and slid under the bed, the dust scratching my throat, the air stale and thin. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he'd hear it through the floor. The footsteps grew louder, each one a hammer blow in my chest. I watched his shadow stretch across the crack beneath my door. Then nothing. He kept walking, down the stairs. The sound faded slowly, replaced by small, distant noises that made my skin crawl. The faint thunk of a drawer opening, the low scrape of a chair, something metallic clinking against the counter. I pressed my ear to the carpet. I could almost feel him moving below me, his weight shifting through the floorboards. I wanted to run. I wanted to grab the landline in the kitchen, call 911, scream until someone came. But the phone was downstairs, past him. Stay quiet, I whispered to myself, voice trembling. Just stay quiet. Minutes stretched into forever. My muscles screamed, my lungs burned from shallow breaths. Then the creak of the stairs again. He was coming back up. I squeezed my eyes shut, every muscle locked. My heart felt too big for my chest. The footsteps reached the top step and stopped. For a moment there was only silence. Then slowly they moved past my room. A single creak of wood. Then the faint metallic groan of the attic ladder unfolding. And silence again. I stayed under that bed for what felt like hours. My legs cramped, pins and needles stabbing up my calves, but I didn't dare move. I counted my breaths one by one until the air in my room finally felt still again. Then, the turn of a key in the front door. Julian. We're home. Mom's voice called out, light and familiar. I bolted, crawled out, nearly tripping over myself as I sprinted downstairs. Mom, Dad. Sam, I yelled, my voice breaking. There's a man. There was a man in the house. He was in the attic. They all froze. Dad frowned, confusion creasing his forehead. Julian, what are you talking about? Dad, I saw him. I swear. My words tumbled out too fast, breathless. He came down from the attic ladder and walked around. He was right there in the hallway. Samantha rolled her eyes, crossing her arms. You probably imagined it. You scare yourself too easily. But Dad's face changed when he looked at me. His eyes flicked to the tears streaking my cheeks, the tremor in my hands. His expression hardened. He knew I wasn't lying. Without a word, he grabbed the baseball bat from the umbrella stand by the door and started up the stairs. Mom pulled me close, wrapping her arms around me so tightly it almost hurt. It's okay, sweetheart. It's okay, she whispered. But her voice was tight, shaking, her hands trembling against my back. A second later, Dad's voice thundered down from upstairs. Laura! Call the police! Mom gasped, grabbed the phone, and her fingers fumbled over the buttons. My body shook against hers, every sound in the house magnified. The thud of footsteps, the low hum of the line connecting, her voice stammering to the dispatcher. When the officers arrived, they pulled down the attic ladder and climbed up, flashlights cutting through the darkness above. I stayed pressed against Mom's side, shaking so hard my teeth clicked. The silence dragged until one of them shouted, "He's here!" We got him. They dragged the man down a minute later, handcuffed, wild-eyed and filthy. Up close, his skin looked pale and waxy, his hair greasy, his jacket stained with dirt. He didn't resist. He just muttered to himself, words too low to make out as they led him out the door. Later, one of the officers told Dad the man had been living in our attic for days. maybe weeks. There were sleeping bags up there, food wrappers, empty water bottles. He'd built a small space above us, right over our rooms. Somehow we hadn't noticed. Somehow, I'd been sleeping right beneath him. Dad changed the locks that same night, bolted the attic shut the next morning. But nothing he did made the house feel safe again. For years, every time I was alone, I'd hear phantom creaks above me. Faint, dragging footsteps that never led anywhere. I couldn't sit in silence without straining to listen, without waiting for that sound. And even now, as an adult, sometimes I wake in the middle of the night, the air cold and still, and I could swear I hear breathing coming from the attic. I've always thought of myself as someone who doesn't scare easily. Horror movies? I grew up on them. Creepy true crime podcasts? I used to binge them while doing homework. Being alone in a big house never really fazed me. But what happened the Thursday, April 25th, still clings to my memory like a scar that never fully healed. I'm 20, a college sophomore still living with my parents in a semi-rural part of Oregon, about 20 minutes outside a mid-sized city. My parents bought the place a few years back. My mom wanted space and quiet. My dad liked the idea of retiring somewhere without traffic and neighbors breathing down his neck. The house sits on a hill, the gravel driveway curling up from the main road overlooking roughly 3 acres of woods and open field. From my upstairs bedroom window I can see everything, down the slope past the tree line all the way to the road where the forest thickens again. That Thursday morning, I was alone. My mom, a nurse, was on a 12-hour shift. My dad had already left for work. He's in logistics, usually gone by 6. I had class at noon, so I was taking my time, coffee in one hand, notebook in the other. Half studying, half scrolling, curled up on the couch in an oversized hoodie. The house was quiet. Just the occasional tick from the kitchen clock and the faint hum of the refrigerator. Everything was normal. Until it wasn't. Around 10:30, I decided to go upstairs to grab my backpack. As I passed my window, I pulled open the blinds to let in some sunlight, and that's when I saw him. A man. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. He stood halfway down the slope, hands on his hips, staring across our property like he owned the place. Mid-30s maybe, jeans, a faded baseball cap, average build, maybe 5'10". Nothing about him screamed threat, and yet every nerve in my body tensed. I didn't know who he was or why he was there. I just stood there frozen, staring through the glass. Maybe he's a contractor, I muttered to myself. My parents had been talking about renovating the deck, and sometimes people came by to give estimates. But those guys always parked in the driveway, knocked on the door, at least announced themselves. This guy hadn't, he was just wandering. I grabbed my phone and dialed my dad. "Hey," I said as soon as he picked up. "Did you hire someone to come by the house today? There's a guy outside." "What guy?" My dad's voice sounded distracted, maybe mid-meeting or wrangling his crew. "Some random guy, ball cap, jeans. He's down the hill, just looking around." "I didn't hire anybody," Dad said immediately, his tone tightening. "Hold on, let me call your mom. Stay inside and lock the doors." "Okay," I said, my throat dry. When I looked back out the window, my stomach dropped. The man had moved. He wasn't down the slope anymore. He was in the driveway, just strolling, glancing at the house, peering toward the side yard like he was inspecting something. Something about the way he moved made my skin crawl. He didn't look lost. He didn't look confused. He looked comfortable, like he belonged there. I stepped back from the window, my pulse hammering in my ears. I went around the house, checking every door and window, twisting locks until my fingers hurt. My hands were trembling, and I kept whispering to myself, "You're overreacting, you're fine, it's nothing." But that tightness in my chest wouldn't go away. My phone buzzed again, Dad calling back. "Your mom says she didn't hire anyone either," he said, his voice low but tense now. "Listen, call the police. Don't wait, just call. I'll keep my phone on me." "Okay." Our cell service is terrible inside the house, so I grabbed the landline and dialed the local police station. A woman answered, her voice clipped and unconcerned. I explained everything, strange man, walking the property, not knocking, not saying anything. She sighed. "That's not an emergency, ma'am. You'll need to call the non-emergency line." My stomach twisted. "Ma'am, I'm a college student home alone, and there's a man circling my house. He hasn't said anything. He's just there." Call the non-emergency line, she repeated, almost bored, and rattled off the number. I hung up, frustration prickling behind my eyes, and immediately dialed it. The call rang twice before clicking to an automated voice. Thank you for calling the non-emergency hotline. Nobody is available at this time. If this is an emergency, please hang up and dial 911. I just stood there staring at the receiver. The voice kept repeating, sterile and emotionless. This couldn't be real. It felt like some kind of cruel joke, like I was being tested to see how long I'd hold out before panicking. My hand trembled as I hung up and punched in 911. The operator's voice was calm, too calm. What's your emergency? There's a man outside my house, I said quickly, my voice rising with every word. I don't know who he is. He's been walking around for at least 15 minutes. He has a white Honda parked in front of my house. No plates. Please send someone. Her tone stayed even, methodical. She asked for his description. Clothing, height, whether I could see any weapons. I crouched near the window, careful not to let the blinds shift, and whispered what I saw. The man was sitting in the car now, engine off, one arm resting on the steering wheel. Something blared from inside, music maybe, or a voice on speakerphone. It was loud enough that I could hear it through the still air. A man's voice, sharp, animated, carrying across the empty yard. Stay on the line with me, I told the operator, clutching the phone like a lifeline. And then, click. The call went dead. No static, no warning. Just silence, followed by that piercing disconnect tone. I blinked, staring at the phone like it might explain itself. My thumb hovered over redial when another call came in. Unknown number. My stomach twisted, but I answered anyway, thinking maybe the dispatcher was trying to reconnect. At first, I heard nothing. Then came the breathing. Heavy, slow, drawn out, each inhale rasping against the receiver. Hello? I said, voice cracking. Nothing. Just that breathing. I slammed the phone down, heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. My hands shook as I redialed 911. A different operator answered this time, brisk and alert. We're already dispatching officers to your address, she said before I could even explain. Stay calm. Stay inside. The next 20 minutes stretched into forever. I kept peeking through the upstairs blinds, afraid to move them too much. The man was still there, still sitting in his car, not leaving, not even fidgeting, just waiting. My hands trembled so badly I could barely text my dad. They still aren't here. He's still outside. Dad called immediately. Stay upstairs, he said, his voice tense but controlled. Don't go near the door. I know, I whispered, clutching the phone to my chest. Every creak in the house felt magnified. The groan of the floorboards, the faint hum of the fridge, the tick of the clock. The silence between those sounds was worse. Finally, after what felt like hours, I saw the flash of red and blue at the bottom of the driveway. Relief hit me so hard I almost cried until I noticed the timing. The very moment the police pulled in, the man started his car. He didn't speed off. He just rolled forward slowly, meeting them halfway down the gravel path. They talked for maybe 5 minutes. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I watched one of the officers gesture toward the house, then shake his head, and then they let him go. I just stood there frozen at the window, watching the white Honda turn around and disappear down the road. When one of the officers finally came up to the door, I opened it just enough to see his badge. Ma'am, he said, calm as ever, handing me a folded flyer. The man said he's a landscaper. Said he had an appointment here. I blinked, confusion making my head swim. A landscaper? My parents never... He shrugged, already turning away. That's what he told us. Nothing illegal about being in your driveway. And that was it. They left. I called my mom the second their taillights vanished. The cop said it was a landscaper, I told her, still shaking. A landscaper? She repeated, her voice sharp with confusion. Why would we hire one? Our yard doesn't need work. I didn't call anybody. Dad didn't either, I said quietly. Silence stretched between us, long and heavy. So, who the hell was that man? I whispered. No answer. Just my mother's breathing on the other end, ragged and uneven. That night I barely slept. Every sound outside felt like footsteps in the gravel. Every passing car made me rush to the window. The next morning I went down to where the white Honda had been parked. The tire tracks were still there, faint impressions in the dirt. And lying half buried in gravel was the flyer the cop had given me. A generic advertisement for lawn care. No business name, no phone number, Just an email address scribbled in shaky handwriting. I never emailed it. I never called. But sometimes when the wind rattles the windows at night, I think about the way that man moved around my house with such quiet confidence. The way he looked at the windows. The heavy breathing that filled the line right after my 911 call dropped. And I wonder, if he wasn't here to landscape, what was he really inspecting? I never liked staying home alone. Not because I was afraid of the dark, but because silence always felt wrong. It wasn't peaceful. It was loud in a different way, like the quiet had weight to it, pressing against my ears until I could hear my own heartbeat. Growing up, there was always noise. The TV mumbling from the living room, my mom humming off-key while cooking, my younger cousin yelling at video games down the hall. That constant buzz made me feel safe. But when everything went still, it was like the air itself was listening. By the time this happened, I was 23, and living by myself for the first time in a small 2-story townhouse on the edge of a mid-sized city in Indiana. My name's Elijah Whitaker, but most people call me Eli. I'd moved in about 6 months earlier, back in May of 2019, after finally saving enough to leave the cramped apartment I'd shared with 2 old college roommates. At first, it felt like freedom. I could decorate however I wanted, blast music at midnight, leave dishes in the sink without waking up to a passive-aggressive sticky note. I thought that kind of freedom would feel good, and it did for a while. But it also came with a quiet that felt a little too big for one person. I worked full-time as a loan officer at a local credit union. Long hours under humming fluorescent lights, polite smiles, endless paperwork. By the time I got home each night, the silence in that townhouse felt like stepping into a vacuum. I wasn't seeing anyone seriously back then, and most of my friends were drifting into new lives, marriages, babies, out-of-state jobs. I told myself I liked being alone. Sometimes I even believed it. But what happened that night reminded me exactly why silence had never been a friend of mine. That week had been brutal. The holidays always brought chaos. People begging for small loans, desperate to refinance before Christmas. The branch was packed every day, and by the time I left work that Friday, December 13th, I felt wrung out. "Hey, Whitaker!" my coworker Trent Myers called after me as I clocked out, raking a hand through his messy blonde hair. Couple of us are grabbing drinks at O'Malley's. "You coming?" I shook my head, rubbing my eyes. "Not tonight, man. I'm dead on my feet." Trent smirked, leaning on the doorframe. "Suit yourself. Don't let that big old house of yours eat you alive." I laughed, but his words lingered a little too long. The next morning, I slept in until 9. The pale winter light crept weakly through the blinds, painting the room in thin gray stripes. I made coffee, dropped a Fleetwood Mac record on the turntable, my mom's Saturday tradition, and tried to feel at ease. Around noon, Mom called. "You're coming tomorrow, right?" she asked, voice bright and familiar. "Yeah, of course. What time you want me there?" I said, sipping coffee. "Early afternoon's fine. I'll make lasagna. Your Uncle Martin and Cousin Noah are coming too." "Sounds good," I said. Just normal talk, family stuff. But I'd think about that call later. The last completely ordinary thing before everything started to twist. By sunset, I was too lazy to cook, so I decided to order in. I was scrolling through food apps when I heard it, a soft crunch of footsteps in the snow outside. I froze. My thumb hovered over the screen, pulse ticking in my ears. It could have been a neighbor. There were only 6 units in my cul-de-sac. Still, something about the rhythm of those steps felt deliberate, measured, almost cautious. I went to the window, parted the blinds with 2 fingers, and scanned the street. Empty. Just the yellow cone of the street lamp bleeding into the snow. "Get a grip, Eli," I muttered under my breath. I turned back to the couch, ordered pizza, and flipped on the TV. The laughter track from some sitcom filled the room, chasing the quiet away. At 8:15, a knock hit the door. Hard. Not the quick, polite kind you get from a delivery driver. a heavy, deliberate thud, thud, thud that vibrated through the frame. My stomach clenched. The app said the delivery was still 10 minutes out. I padded to the door quietly, careful not to make the floor creak, and leaned toward the peephole. A man stood on my porch, mid-30s, maybe older. Gray hoodie pulled up tight around his face. His hands were buried deep in the front pocket. Just standing there, still, waiting. He wasn't holding a pizza box. He wasn't smiling. He just stood there motionless, the porch light catching the edge of his hood. I didn't open the door. "Yeah?" I called through it, trying to sound casual, normal. There was a pause, a few seconds too long before he spoke. His voice was low, rough, like gravel dragged across pavement. "Sorry, man. My car broke down. Can I use your phone?" My throat tightened. Every instinct screamed no. "Sorry, I can't help," I said quickly. "Good luck, though." Another pause. Then, flatter this time, "Come on, man. Just a quick call. Won't take a minute." Something about the way he said it, monotone, almost rehearsed, made my skin prickle. I said no, I snapped, louder than I meant to. "Sorry." I stepped back from the door. Silence. No footsteps, no movement. Just that horrible, waiting silence. I stood frozen for a few seconds before forcing myself toward the kitchen. My pulse was a constant thud in my ears. I told myself to shake it off, that people broke down all the time. Maybe he really did just need a phone. Then I heard it. The faint click of the back gate. My townhouse had a small fenced yard with a wooden gate that led out to the alley. No one ever used it. My chest went tight. I reached for the counter, grabbed the biggest kitchen knife I owned, and held it awkwardly, my palm slick with sweat. The curtains over the sliding glass door were drawn, but I could see movement, a shadow shifting across the fabric. "Who's there?" I shouted, voice trembling despite my effort to sound brave. No answer. The shadow just moved slowly, like whoever was out there didn't care that I could see them. Then the handle rattled once, twice. My blood went cold. I fumbled for my phone and dialed 911, whispering into the receiver. "There's someone trying to break into my house," I said, crouching behind the counter. "I'm at 1824 Millbrook Court. Please, send someone fast." "Stay on the line with me," the operator said calmly. "Are you alone in the house?" "Yes," I whispered. My voice cracked. Then, glass shattered. My heart lurched into my throat. "The back door. He's inside," I whispered, barely breathing. "Oh my God, he's inside." "Stay calm," she said. "Officers are on their way. Can you secure yourself in a room?" I ran. 2 steps at a time up the stairs, knife still in one hand, phone pressed to my ear with the other. My lungs burned. I slammed my bedroom door shut and shoved my dresser against it, my heart pounding so violently I could feel it in my teeth. Downstairs, footsteps, slow, deliberate. "Where are the police?" I whispered into the phone. "They're on their way. Stay quiet. Stay where you are." The footsteps moved across my living room, pausing every few seconds. I could hear drawers being opened, things clattering to the floor. Whoever he wasn't in a hurry. Then silence again. I held my breath, straining to hear. My hand ached from clutching the knife too tightly. Then, a floorboard creaked upstairs. My entire body went rigid. He was on the 2nd floor. The steps came closer, one slow tread after another. I could hear his breathing now, steady, calm. He stopped right outside my bedroom door. The handle jiggled once, twice. Then his voice, low, mocking, almost gentle, drifted through the wood. "Open up, Eli." My stomach dropped. He knew my name. I didn't answer, didn't move. "Open the door," he whispered, sing-song. "I just want to talk." The handle rattled harder. The door shook in its frame. Then, silence. For a fleeting second, I thought he'd gone. Then came the crack of splintering wood. He was kicking the door. I pressed harder against the dresser, the sound of my heartbeat drowning everything else. "Police are almost there," the operator said. her voice barely cutting through the noise. "Hold on just a little longer." But in that moment, I didn't think I'd last another second. The dresser began to slide under the force of his kicks, just inches. But then another sound cut through the chaos. Sirens. Faint at first, then louder. Closer. The pounding stopped. The house went still. For a few seconds, all I could hear was my own ragged breathing. Then, footsteps retreating, the crash of the sliding door, and the crunch of boots on snow fading into the night. I didn't move until I heard voices downstairs shouting, "Police! Come out with your hands up!" When they finally forced open my bedroom door, I was shaking so violently I couldn't form words. My voice was gone, my throat raw from holding back screams. They didn't catch him that night. I gave my statement in fragments, trembling, my mind replaying his voice over and over. They found footprints in the snow, the shattered glass, a few missing things, my laptop, my wallet, some electronics. But it wasn't what he took that kept me awake for weeks. It was the way he'd said my name, soft, familiar, certain. To this day, I don't know how he knew it. Maybe he'd been watching me. Maybe he'd followed me home one night and heard someone call out. Or maybe, just maybe, he'd already been inside before, walking my halls, learning my house, learning me. I moved out 3 weeks later, and now every time the night goes silent, I can't help but wonder if somewhere out there, someone else is pressing their ear to a door, whispering my name. I had just turned 20 and was home from college for the summer, savoring the rare luxury of sleeping in my own bed without the endless noise of dorm life. The slamming doors, laughter in the hallways, the thrum of someone's speaker through the walls. My best friend Lena had just moved into a small, steeply perched house on the outskirts of Ravenwood Hills with her boyfriend Evan. He'd recently started working night shifts at the local hospital, which meant Lena was often alone in the house after dark. We'd been inseparable since high school. Lena had always been a little on edge, high-strung but endearing, her anxiety woven into her charm. I had my own battles with it too, though after a year of living alone at college, I'd learned to sit with the quiet hum of solitude. Her house was modest, a single-story place perched high on a hill overlooking a forest that seemed to stretch endlessly behind it. The backyard was a narrow slice of land that curved around toward the front, connected by a small concrete path climbing up from the sidewalk. The kitchen had a back door with a large glass window, and above it hung a motion sensor light angled toward that narrow walkway. Oddly, the light couldn't detect movement in the yard itself, only along the path, where it pooled its white glow like a stage spotlight waiting for someone to step into it. It was a Tuesday, when Lena first called me about it. The phone rang close to 3 a.m., jolting me awake. Her voice was trembling so badly I could hear her breath stutter through the line. "Jade," she whispered, "you're not asleep, right?" "I'm up," I murmured, rubbing at my eyes. "What's wrong?" "It's someone or something." Her words came out in gasps. "The light outside, it keeps flickering on and off. I swear, Jade, it's moving." I sat up in bed, pulse starting to race. "Okay, slow down. Are you sure it's not just a raccoon or maybe the wind?" She gave a short, nervous laugh. "It's too precise. It's like someone's watching. I keep looking out and it stops. Then it starts again." Even through the static, I could feel her fear. It was sharp, contagious. "All right, Lena," I said quietly. "Stay on the phone with me, okay? Don't go near the door. Sit on the couch, keep the lights low. I'll stay with you." I heard the faint rustle of a blanket as she sank into the couch. "I can't relax," she whispered. "I feel like I can see it, just past the glass. I can't—" "Hey," I cut in gently. "Breathe. Just breathe. You're safe right now. I'm here." We stayed that way for hours, her whispering updates in shaky bursts, me murmuring reassurances, both of us listening to the silence between our breaths. Eventually, her voice went quiet. When Evan got home just after sunrise, the light hadn't flickered again. His presence seemed to anchor the house, dulling the sharp edges of her fear. "Maybe it was just someone testing things," he said the next morning over breakfast. His voice casual, but his eyes scanning the yard through the kitchen window. "There have been reports of break-ins across the street. Just keep the doors locked, okay?" When his next night shift came around, Lena begged me to stay over. I agreed, figuring my company might calm her nerves, or at least keep her from spiraling. We arrived at her place around 7, the sky melting into a violet dusk. I carried an air mattress under my arm, while she fussed over snacks and candles. The night began quietly, two friends watching old comedies, quoting lines, laughing too loudly just to chase away the unease that seemed to cling to the walls. Around 11, she turned to me suddenly. "Hey, want to take a drive? The vape shop by McDonald's is still open." "That's like 40 minutes away," I said, raising an eyebrow. She shrugged, smiling faintly. "You don't have to come. I just don't want to sit here waiting for the light to do that again." "I'm coming," I said, forcing a grin. "Better to be out there with you than in here imagining monsters." The drive was quiet, the dark road lined with trees that pressed close to the car. We kept the radio low, talking about college, about Evan, about how strange it felt to be adults pretending to be fearless. When we pulled back into her driveway around 12:30 a.m., the motion light glowed steadily, blank and harmless. Inside, the air mattress was already inflated in the living room, the soft hiss of plastic echoing faintly in the stillness. We crawled onto it, the vinyl cool against our skin, the forest outside humming with crickets. For a while it felt peaceful, too peaceful. The room was dim, lit only by a single lamp that cast a weak amber glow across the floor. The quiet felt heavy, almost unnatural, until, without warning, the motion sensor light outside flared to life. "Lena, it's probably just an animal," I said, trying to sound casual, though my stomach tightened like a fist. "No, Jade, look." Her voice was sharp, breath trembling. "It's on again." We both turned toward the back door. The light flickered erratically, off for a moment, then back on, the bursts of white glare cutting through the glass in stuttering intervals, longer each time like a heartbeat growing more deliberate. Lena swallowed hard, her hand gripping the edge of the couch. "I can't take this," she muttered, standing abruptly. "I'm getting Evan's gun." "Lena, wait!" But she was already halfway up the stairs, her bare feet whispering against the carpet. I followed, every nerve in me alive. The air upstairs felt thicker, colder somehow, as if the house itself was holding its breath. "Jade!" she called from the top of the stairs, voice shaking but defiant. "I have a gun. I'm not afraid to use it." I forced a weak laugh, trying to break the tension. "Okay, good, that's comforting." She came back down clutching the handgun awkwardly in both hands, her knuckles white. The light outside flickered again. This time the glow stretched across the room, and our shadows sprawled long and thin over the walls, distorted, trembling shapes that seemed almost alive. Neither of us spoke. I could feel it, the sense that something was out there, watching from beyond that narrow slice of concrete, just beyond the reach of the light. It wasn't paranoia. It was presence. Hours dragged by. The house was silent except for the occasional click of the light switching on, then off, then on again. Each time it did, Lena would flinch. Each time my heart pounded a little harder. Around 4 a.m, exhaustion finally caught up to me. I stood to get a glass of water, my throat dry, my body running on adrenaline. As I turned back toward the mattress, Lena's face made me stop cold. She was pale, her lips trembling. Her eyes were fixed on the window. "Jade," she whispered, "get back." I froze, my hand still wrapped around the glass. Slowly I turned my head. The light outside was on again, steady this time, slicing through the darkness in a single unwavering beam. And I knew, instantly, it wasn't random. The flicker, the pauses. It had been rhythmic, intentional. Someone was triggering it, deliberately. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. It felt foolish the moment the words left my mouth. No answer. Just the forest, alive with the faint hum of insects, the distant sigh of wind through trees, the quiet rustle of something moving where we couldn't see. The light stayed on until the first gray edge of dawn touched the horizon. The air shifted. Pink and orange began bleeding into the sky. Then, as if on cue, the light blinked off, once, twice, and stayed dark. We sat there for a long time, neither of us speaking. The silence felt heavier now, almost oppressive. When Lena finally exhaled, her voice was hoarse. "Should we call the police?" I hesitated. The thought of trying to explain, two girls scared of a flickering light, felt ridiculous. "What if they don't believe us?" I said quietly. "They'll think it's a prank." Lena rubbed her eyes, tears pooling at the corners. "It didn't feel like a prank." I nodded. "No, it didn't." That morning, Evan came home to find us still awake, sitting stiffly on the couch. We didn't tell him everything, just that the light had gone off again. But after that night, something in the house changed. The air felt wrong, charged, as if the walls remembered. Even after the fear dulled, I could never quite shake it. Every time the light outside flickered, even by accident, I'd feel that same tightness in my chest, that same crawling awareness. I still believe someone was out there that night. Maybe they'd planned to break in and change their mind when they realized Lena wasn't alone. Or maybe it was worse. Someone who took pleasure in the power of watching, of knowing we were afraid. Lena's anxiety deepened after that. She started keeping the curtains drawn, the porch light always on. Mine never fully went away either. Even now, every summer night, every quiet house on a hill, every sudden flash of light in the dark, it all brings me back to that night in Ravenwood Hills, to the stillness between each flicker, to the terrible certainty that for those long, sleepless hours, someone was out there and we were not alone. We were. I live alone in a small one-bedroom house in the quiet suburbs of Maplewood. For me, it's just the right size. Enough room to stretch out without feeling hollow, and small enough to actually feel like home. I moved here a year ago, chasing silence after years of bouncing between shared apartments and claustrophobic studios. My name's Liam Carter, and I make my living as a freelance graphic designer. Basically, I spend most of my waking hours glued to a laptop, headphones clamped on, shut off from the rest of the world. The house itself is modest. Brick exterior, a squat little porch, a one-car garage that barely fits my hatchback, and a backyard just big enough for a grill and 2 folding chairs. The street ends a few yards past my driveway, so there's never traffic, never kids yelling, never anything. At first, I loved it. The stillness, the control, the private hum of my own little world. But one night, that feeling cracked. It was a Thursday in late October. The air outside carried that thin, crisp bite that says winter's coming but not yet here. I'd been working all day, sketching mock-ups, resizing logos, fighting with fonts until the lines blurred. Around 7, I made a lazy dinner, pasta drowned in store-bought sauce, eaten straight from the bowl in front of the TV. "Okay, Liam," I muttered to no one, stacking the empty bowl on the coffee table. A couple of episodes, then bed. No doom scrolling, promise. The living room was warm, the heater humming softly in the corner. My cat Milo had claimed his usual perch on the arm of the couch, a soft gray lump of purring contentment. I wrapped a blanket around myself, scrolling through streaming options until I landed on some new mystery series, the kind with foggy streets and detectives who never smile. By 10:30, I was fully sunk into the couch, popcorn bowl balanced on my lap, the flicker of the TV painting restless shadows on the walls. That's when I heard it, a faint dragging sound, so quiet I almost missed it. At first, I thought it came from the show. I muted the TV, and the sound remained. It wasn't constant, more like a pattern, a slow scuff, a soft scrape, then stillness. The hairs along my neck rose. It's probably the heater, I whispered to myself, trying to sound casual, even as my throat tightened. Then it came again, clearer this time. Near the garage, my breath hitched. "Hello?" I called, my voice embarrassingly thin. "Is someone there?" No answer, just that deep ringing quiet that follows when a house holds its breath. I waited. Nothing. Trying to be rational, I pushed the blanket off and stood. "Okay, chill. It's the ductwork. Maybe a mouse." My own voice sounded ridiculous, too loud in the silence. Milo's ears twitched, but he didn't move. I grabbed my phone, using its light as I walked through the pantry toward the garage. The deeper I went, the louder my heartbeat thudded in my ears. The noise, now definitely a shuffle, was coming from inside. I stopped at the garage door, hand hovering over the knob. "Just check," I whispered, my pulse drumming in my wrists. I flicked on the light. The bare bulb overhead flickered to life, throwing harsh light across the concrete floor. Shadows leaned long and crooked across the walls. The shelves stood empty, dusty, like a lineup of tired soldiers. Nothing moved. "Milo, you're freaking me out for no reason," I muttered, even though Milo wasn't anywhere near me. I stepped inside, my socks whispering against the cold cement. I peered into each corner, the broom, the paint cans, the folded lawn chair. All still. "Okay," I breathed, forcing a nervous laugh. "I'm officially paranoid." I shut the light off, closed the door, and went back to the living room. Every creak in the floorboards made my skin prickle. I tried to focus on the TV again, but the words and images washed over me without meaning. Eventually, exhaustion beat out the fear. Milo climbed into my lap, curling himself into a warm, vibrating ball against my chest. His slow purr filled the silence like a lullaby, and my eyelids grew heavy. When I woke, sunlight was spilling through the blinds, sharp and gold. The air smelled faintly of dust and morning coffee grounds. I stretched, yawning, the unease from last night already fading into something that felt stupid in daylight. I padded toward the kitchen, rubbing the sleep from my eyes, then froze. The front door was wide open. For a second, my brain couldn't process it, like my eyes were lying to me. Then my stomach dropped so fast I thought I might be sick. I ran to the garage. That door, too, gaped open to the cold morning air. "I locked both," I whispered, the words barely leaving my lips. "I locked both before bed." A flash of panic shot through me. My chest felt too tight to breathe. I sprinted through the house, heart pounding, checking every room, bathroom, bedroom, closets, even crouching to look under the bed and behind the couch. Nothing. No one. But the silence had changed. It didn't feel empty. It felt vacated. Someone had been here. Someone had walked these same floors while I slept just down the hall. My knees gave out and I sank into a kitchen chair. My hands trembled as I pressed them against the table, trying to ground myself. "Oh my God, someone was here," I whispered, the words barely audible. Milo rubbed against my shin, purring softly, as if he could sense the fear radiating off me. I grabbed my phone with shaking fingers and called Jared, my closest friend. He picked up on the second ring. "Yo, Liam, what's up?" "Jared?" I stammered. "I think someone broke into my house last night." "What?" His tone flipped instantly from casual to sharp. "Are you serious? Are you okay?" I don't know," I said, pacing the kitchen. "Everything's still here. Nothing's missing, but both doors were open this morning. I know I locked them." "Did you call the police?" I don't know if I should. There's no proof, just..." I stopped, struggling for words. "Just this feeling like they were here and left before I woke up, like I missed them by minutes." There was a long pause on the line. "Man, you sound freaked out." Maybe you just forgot to lock them. I wanted to believe that. God, I wanted to. But deep down, I knew better. For weeks, sleep was a stranger. Every sound jolted me awake. The creak of the mailbox, a neighbor's car door slamming, even Milo's tiny claws clicking across the floorboards. I installed new deadbolts, motion sensor lights, and a small camera in the living room and another near the garage. The first night after that, I didn't even try to sleep. I sat on the couch for hours, eyes locked on the garage door, every creak making me flinch. My imagination spun out of control. What if they'd left something behind? What if they were still watching? Jared came by one evening with takeout, trying to talk me down. "You're freaking yourself out, man," he said between bites, shaking his head. "I'm not," I snapped. My voice cracked halfway through. "Something happened. Someone was here, I can feel it." "You didn't see anyone, right?" "No, but that doesn't matter," I muttered, staring past him toward the darkened hallway. "I know it. I know it." He sighed. "You've been working too much, bro. You need a break. Maybe stay at my place for a few nights." But I couldn't. The thought of leaving my house, of giving whoever it was another chance to come back, terrified me even more. Months passed. Nothing else happened. No break-ins, no strange noises, no proof that anyone had ever been inside. And yet the peace never returned. I still double-checked every lock before bed, sometimes triple-checked, standing there in my pajamas with the key still in my hand just to make sure. I even latched the inside of the garage door, something I'd never bothered to do before. The comfort I'd once felt in this little house was gone. Every sound seemed suspicious. Every shadow stretched too long. I told myself to move on, to stop living like prey. But some part of me stayed wired for danger. I never found out who it was, or why. Maybe I never will. Still, sometimes late at night, when the house has gone completely still and Milo's asleep on my lap, I swear I hear it again, that soft, dragging shuffle from near the garage. Just for a moment, and I freeze, wondering if they're still out there, or worse, if they never left. I know now that I'll never feel truly safe in my own home again. The thought terrifies me, but it also anchors me. A reminder that the world can flip from harmless to hostile in a heartbeat. That control, any control, is an illusion. I live more cautiously now. I never leave my doors unlocked. I always check the windows twice. Some nights when the air feels heavy and the shadows seem to move, I whisper to Milo, "It's okay, buddy. We're safe." But deep down, I know the truth. The house remembers. And maybe someone else does too.